going to be doing a triple act where three of our team will tell you about our repository. And this is also the first of three talks about data repositories that you're going to hear. And right at the end, because I'm giving the last talk, I'll give a little bit of an overview of how these three fit together. And first repository you'll hear about is the BioImage Archive. And we are a deposition database for life science imaging data, like this rather beautiful Drosophila patterning example here. But we take data from any imaging modality with some degree of redirection to more specialized resources where they exist, with the one exception that we don't take patient identifiable medical data, so particularly things in the heavily clinical imaging domain. And we take data not only from many different imaging modalities, but data that are used for lots of different types of biological investigation. So many different organisms, many different areas of research. I think everything on this slide is a slightly different type of microscopy and also a different organism of interest. We are part of EBI, so the European Bioinformatics Institute. That's where actually all of the data resources you'll hear about this afternoon are hosted, although the IDR, which Jean-Marie will tell you about, is run by the IDR and OME teams. And we are the EBI is part of the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, which is the Europe's flagship life sciences research institute, which you've probably heard about in the imaging world, with sites across Europe. EBI is the only purely computational site, but actually all of the other EMBL sites do an awful lot of imaging. Heidelberg for one, and actually most of the other talks that you'll hear this afternoon come from Heidelberg, not all. One of the things that we do at the EBI is we manage resources for biological data, by which we really mean computational data. And we do this across lots of different domains, from genomics and structural biology and chemistry, and including things like ontologies, which Isabel mentioned earlier on. And what we'll really be talking about today is the imaging related resources, and Empire will be covered later on. I'm focusing on the BioImage Archive. And as I said, we're a deposition database for images, primarily images associated with publications. So it's an interesting discussion later on about the split between what makes it into the publication and almost a vast trail of data behind it. We're focused on publication, but we also take data from structured projects and reference imaging data sets under certain circumstances. And the reason we take the data and store it and index it and make it available is very much linked to the things Isabel was talking about earlier, to support reproducibility, so the ability to track back from figures and tables and publications to underlying data, but also to support and encourage reuse for lots of different reasons. Sometimes that's de novo science, sometimes, in fact, often it's teaching and training. And actually, one of the big initial focuses for reuse is methods development in image analysis, because that tends to be one of the most data hungry domains, particularly if we're talking about modern AI techniques. We do this sort of primary route to interact with us through our website, and the website serves the two main functions of both submitting data, which you'll hear about more from Oberke and Teresa, and interacting with and downloading our existing data. And that data is primarily accessible through search. So we have a fairly flexible search system that combines both free text search and searching for more specific facets of data. And it actually searches across both the BioImage Archive and Empire. And there's an example here of this searching for microglia, which includes not only imaging data or light microscopy data sets, but for example, structural biology related data in Empire. For the imaging data sets we hold all of this important rich metadata that Isabel was talking about. And this includes both high-level information about what the data set was for, what the study that the data set accompanies, but also often more specific data that's linked to individual images. So for example, for fluorescence microscopy, what was fluorescing in the different channels and what the transgenics or immunofluorescence, or what is causing the signal in those channels. The archive is actually fairly new. I'll talk about where the different data resources fit history-wise later on. We've only been running since 2019 and actually really only under active development since 2021. Not surprisingly, it's grown quite rapidly. So 2022, we doubled roughly the number of released data sets that we have. And certainly the size growth has been very rapid. We really started to talk a little bit about size and scalability. Worth mentioning, though, especially when I come back to talk about EMBL later on, it's still the absolute magnitude of this is still quite small compared to, for example, single particle cryo-EM data. There's a lot of room to grow. Briefly, before we go into specifics, a couple of things that we're actively working on because they're partly the carrot in the reason why you might want to deposit data. We're looking closely at how we make data interactively visualizable and explorable using modern tools and file formats, which you'll hear about later on, in browser. So actually it's screenshots of the interactive visualization app together with metadata in not just 2D, but also 3D for appropriate data sets, because very often the things we do are interesting in 3 dimensions and also 3 dimensions over time. And then finally, how we provide the right kind of programmatic access to this data. So if what you really want to do is to be able to load an interesting data set and then work through the process of how the figures in the paper were arrived at directly from the data, you can do that. And we have one example which we might be able to provide in the links of going from the raw data through the projection process to actually an animated movie over time.